Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Thank you so much for joining me again this week. I got a comment on my last YouTube upload, which, by the way, here's something I would like to kind of clarify for people listening to the podcast who also subscribe to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. Google has gotten rid of Google Podcasts. Google Podcasts as a platform doesn't exist anymore. So instead, what Google has done is it's integrated podcasts with YouTube. So recently, within the past few months, less than that, last couple months, maybe 2 or 3 months, podcasters have been able to import their RSS feeds into YouTube. So now YouTube is also a podcast platform. So now my YouTube channel, Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, automatically gets each new podcast that hits that RSS feed. And it automatically applies the thumbnail, the background image, whatever image I upload to the back end of my podcast platform, which is Spreaker, by the way. That's the back end we use at the radio station also. So if I do a show on the Apple Vision Pro and then I make a thumbnail of the Vision Pro and me or whatever, that's what gets automatically fed into the YouTube RSS podcast feed. So that's why you see sometimes, and I'm trying to manage this, like how do I do this where you'll get like the video version, you're watching me right now, this video version of the podcast, the intentional video version of the podcast. But then within a few days later, you'll see almost the same title or a similar title show up. And then it's just a static background of a thumbnail and you're hearing basically the same audio that's in this intentional video. It's kind of I don't know how YouTube is. It's something to navigate here, and where it gets kind of interesting and where it gets honestly a little bit frustrating. First of all, I appreciate that podcasts are integrated automatically into YouTube now. YouTube takes your RSS feed and automatically generates a podcast video for people to listen to. Part of the confusion, though, is like I imported the RSS feed, and I have like 400 back shows going back to like 2017. It's literally hundreds of in individual podcast episodes. So sometimes, so what's happening now? What I'm seeing now is I'll get these comments and negative comments or trolls or even sometimes good comments of something that I put out 5 or 6 years ago, like a show from 2017 hits YouTube now. So people are like, why are you talking about the Apple AirPods Max or whatever Apple's headphones that came out in like 2019? Why are you talking about MacBook Pro Throttlegate? Remember when Mac was still on the Intel i9 processors? Why are you talking about Throttlegate now, dude? I'm like, yeah, the show was from years ago, and it's just now hitting YouTube because YouTube has integrated podcasts. Because Google got rid of the Google Podcast, and now it's all integrated into YouTube. So yeah, you're seeing these new uploads of shows that are 5-6 years old. So I'm mitigating. I'm dealing with that kind of confusion, and I feel like. Well, YouTube comments are YouTube comments, but people, I don't know that they always put 2 and 2 together. Like, if I'm talking about the M1 MacBook Pro 13 like launch, you might be able to put 2 and 2 together that maybe this is audio from a few years ago. But I don't blame the YouTube viewer. I don't blame new people who just find the channel. It's kind of confusing, and I want all of my episodes to be available on YouTube as audio only. So yeah, there's going to be shows like cringe stuff, like early on cringe stuff from 2017, 2018 that are going to be now suddenly in front of a lot more people in 2024. And they're going to think it's new and fresh. And maybe not all of them are going to realize that it's 5 or 6 years old yet. So anyways, that's why you're seeing more podcasts on YouTube, period, not just Geek Therapy Radio, but others, because my RSS feed, Geek Therapy Radio podcast RSS feed, is now integrated into YouTube as well. Overall, it's a good thing. It's a lot more exposure to a lot more audience. I know that I do this, and maybe some of you listening or watching this YouTube video also do this, where sometimes you'll just put on a video and you'll leave the tab open in the background while you work, while you study, while you do whatever. There's entire YouTube channels, lo-fi beats, whatever, to study to, which is not necessarily designed for you to sit there watching for 7 hours straight. But it's something that you put on YouTube and then you minimize it, or you just keep it in a background tab somewhere. So that's what podcasts are on YouTube. That's what even videos like this, you know, when I'm doing the intentional video, I don't expect every single person to sit here and watch it for 39 minutes or whatever it winds up being. But I kind of expect people to turn it on and maybe minimize it and go about their day doing whatever they want to do. But it's however you want to watch this. And I've also been more intentional about recording the video versions of these podcasts, even if it's just me sitting in front of a microphone with my guitars or whatever's going on in the background behind me. Because if people don't like it, whatever. Like I don't make any money off of YouTube. I think I make like $20 every few months off YouTube. I'm good. Like I don't need this outlet to generate money. If it does generate money, that's awesome. But I'm very intentional with how and where I put ads, especially in this long form stuff. You'll notice that I put the ad breaks in the commercial breaks, in the division between segments. It's not just me talking and then an ad appears out of nowhere. It's kind of welcome, we'll come back to Geek Therapy Radio in a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And then you see an ad. And a little more peek behind the curtain here. I didn't know I was going to spend the whole first segment talking about this, but for those of you who just may be finding the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, maybe you're just finding this here on YouTube. This is Geek Therapy Radio is actually a radio show. It airs in Houston, Texas on KPRC 950 AM radio. It's an iHeart radio station. So that's why there are the segments. There's 4 segments, and the timing of it goes first segment 8 minutes, so it's 8, 10, 11, 10. 8-minute first segment, 10-minute second segment, 11-minute third segment, and then another 10-minute fourth segment, all totaling up to about 39 minutes of actual audio content. Because when it airs on the radio, in between segments, you have 3, 4, 5 minutes of ads, of radio spots for God knows what. And then on the podcast, so when you listen to the podcast, that's why you hear it kind of me going to breaks like that. But if you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's instant. You get right back to this segment, especially if you're listening to the podcast. There's less commercial breaks in the podcast. Anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Speaking of a break, don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. As I'm recording here, I'm seeing Microsoft or whatever calendar pop up on my screen that I have a Teams meeting to get to here in the next few minutes. Yeah, we'll see about that. So I might have to, you're not going to notice any difference, but logistically speaking, I might have to end after this segment and come back to it. You won't notice anything's going on. What I did want to talk about this week, though, again, welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, geektherapyradio.com, and all the socials. Just type in Geek Therapy Radio or Geek Therapy Radio Podcast, and you'll find me. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, obviously, and various other platforms. X, Geek Therapy Radio Podcast, and you've got me. So here's the biggest bugaboo that I've been dealing with over the past few weeks. This phone that I'm holding right in front of me with this cool kind of cassette case, protective case on it, is my Galaxy Note 9. Yeah, from 2017, 2018, thereabouts. I'm back on the Galaxy Note 9 because my fancy schmancy Z Fold 4, Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4, is bugging out on me. Let me open it up here. What's happening is, and I'm putting this out there into the world. Well, now it's not even. It's got issues. It's got issues. There we go. Thank you for getting my unlock screen for me. The main issue is that the S Pen doesn't work at all, or it's sporadic, and also that the screen rotation doesn't always work. And so there's a chip in here that controls, it's like the gyroscope, it's the barometer, it's the light sensor, it's all happening on one chip, magnetic sensor. That sensor, that chip is not happy, and it didn't start happening until the One UI 6 update. What is this here? Oh, come on, bring it back up. Yeah, it didn't happen until the One UI version 6.0 update. That's when these problems started to happen. So I'm hoping that the next major firmware issue will correct this problem of screen rotation and S Pen not working. I'm hoping that's a firmware update because it didn't happen until after the last firmware update. The most recent security patch obviously didn't do anything to mitigate it. So I have done a full factory reset. I know you're wondering, well, did you check your settings? Yes, that's a good question. I did. I checked all the settings. I even did a full factory refresh. The only software on there is the software that comes with it, so I didn't download any apps. I went down to factory, just bone level, fresh install, nothing on this phone, and it had the same problems. So it's definitely something that I'm hoping is firmware based. I'm hoping it's just it's not talking to that sensor correctly, and that a firmware update does the trick. So for now, I'm back on my Galaxy Note 9 because the S Pen on the Note 9 definitely works. This phone still works fine. It's getting long in the tooth. It's showing its age in that I have to constantly keep charging this. I'm on this all the time for work. I'm doing things with it. It burns through the battery. This phone gets like hot in my hand. It gets really warm in the hand, and it just chews through the battery throughout the day. I have to keep it plugged in. So, and the one reason I think that's happening is that since this is a phone that's from 2017, 2018, that's at least minimum 6 years old by this point, if not longer. The fact that it still works mostly fine is a testament. But in 6-7 years, software and apps just get so bloated and resource intensive that's where it starts making older phones kind of chug and work a lot harder and burn through a lot more battery. It's not because the phone is necessarily bad or the processor is bad. It's that the apps just keep getting more and more advanced. So if you have like the Facebook app or Messenger app on you and you downloaded it back in 2006, there's 6 years of that app just getting more and more resource intensive, there's more features added to the app, more things that it's asking the phone to do all the time, so that it's like it would be kind of like if you drove an old like Volkswagen Beetle, like a 1972 Volkswagen Beetle with a 1.8 liter air-cooled 4-cylinder making 27 horsepower or whatever, 30 horsepower, and you used to live on this kind of flat street, but then through some geological process, now you're more and more living on a hill, living on an incline. The car stayed the same, but what's being asked of it has increased. It's being asked of the same hardware, and that's what's happening to old phones. Yes, they work just fine, and you push it and you push it and push it, but you're burning through so much more battery. It's slower to do some things, like video editing apps get more and more intensive and require better processors and everything. So this is the Snapdragon 845. In this Galaxy Note 9 from 6 or 7 years ago. Now we're up to Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 in the new Galaxy S24 and the Z Fold 6 that's about to come out sometime. So yeah, I'm on the Galaxy Note 9 and I'm waiting for a firmware update for the Z Fold 4 here. Otherwise, it's been a fantastic phone. But I'm also a little bit frustrated, and I'll just be honest right now, is that in my Amazon shopping cart, I feel like, so in my Amazon shopping cart, I do have the S24 Ultra, and I am a day away maybe from just going ahead and getting it because for a few reasons. My wife's listening, whatever. I need a modern phone to work, as it's becoming increasingly clear to me with my line of work, is that I can't get away with having an underpowered phone anymore. And as great as the Note 9 is, it's just what I do with it is asking a tremendous amount these days, especially for my job. The other thing is, Z Fold 4, great. I love the folding screen. I love how it turns into a small tablet when you open it up. Like, all that stuff is wonderful. Even the cameras on it are pretty good, are really good, actually. But it doesn't fit in a gimbal. One of the things I like to keep with me are those DJI OM gimbals for your phones that kind of clamp on to the phone, and you put your phone on the gimbal. I've got it. Do I have the gimbal next to me somewhere? Maybe I can reach over for it real quick and keep vamping here. I don't see it. I'll put it, well, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. But the folds, since they are thicker and they're not designed, the gimbals are not designed to clamp on to the fold. It's a little bit too thick for all that, and it's just not intuitive to use with the gimbal versus the gimbal that the DJI gimbals are designed to clamp around normal rectangular phones. And I do quite a bit of video work with my phone, and that's another reason why I'm thinking, like, maybe I'll go to the S24. I'll go back to a standard phone, not because I don't like folding phones, but because it's becoming increasingly clear that in my day-to-day work life, it's a priority to be able to put a phone on a gimbal and just film unobstructed. And the other thing is, some apps don't work that great yet on foldables because it doesn't know if is this a folding phone, is this a tablet, is this just a regular slate phone, who knows. YouTube Shorts is like that, or it has been, where it's kind of been funny to use on a folding phone and a tablet, Android tablet at least. And I'm just kind of leaning towards, you know what, I'm the type of person that will, I've said it on the show before, especially when it comes to phones, get at least at minimum 2 to 3 years use out of a flagship smartphone. That means really what should have happened is I get the Z Fold 4 and then I wait 2 or 3 more generations. Like, the next time I'd consideration upgrading the Z Fold 4 is like the Z Fold 7 or 8, that far down the road. Or if I had the Galaxy S21, I would still be rocking the S21 for a few generations, 2 or 3 years, until I'd be considering again the S24, S25, whenever that comes out. So part of my soul hurts that I'm even considering upgrading my phone after only having this for a year and a half or so. Maybe it's a little less than, I think I got this like November 2022, I think is when I got the Z Fold 4, and I've had it a year and a half. It's a little bit before my deadline of my threshold of upgrades. So, but again, I'm just venting to y'all, letting y'all know my thought process, because maybe there's some people out there that kind of have a similar thought process or sympathize with what I'm going through right now. Is that I might have to upgrade my phone sooner than I thought to the S24. We'll see. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. In the previous segment, in segment 2, I was talking about my smartphone woes, in that my Galaxy Z Fold 4, as awesome of a phone as it is having an issue with one of its sensors that controls the S Pen, that controls screen rotation. That's the magnetic sensor, that's the gyroscope, that's the light sensor. It's all happening on one chip handles all that, and that chip is, for whatever reason, malfunctioning. I'm hoping that it's just a firmware issue, because those problems didn't arise until after the major update to One UI 6.0. So I'm hoping that it's a firmware fix, because it's left me, and if you listen to the previous segment, I explained that I'm kind of leaning towards getting the S24 Ultra for multiple reasons, and basically that this is quicker in the phone upgrade cycle than I typically like to make a phone upgrade. Like I mentioned in the previous segment, I like to go at least 2 to 3 years between upgrading phones. I used to go a lot longer than that. I would go up to 5 years, maybe even a little more than 5 years, because in my opinion, phones have kind of plateaued as far as like the user experience. Yes, the cameras get better and better and better, but honestly, case in point, I've been using this Galaxy Note 9 from 2017 or 18, I forget when, and it is 98% as good as anything out there still for just getting on Facebook, checking your emails, doing just kind of general smartphone things. Where it starts lagging behind is in battery life, and it gets hot, and the processor is just going 100% all the time, as I explained, because it's not that the phone got crappier, it's just that that apps get more and more intensive. Apps get more, every update of an app makes it more and more resource intensive, so it just gets bloated. The applications get bloated and bloated and bloated. It's just asking more of the same hardware. So the phone's not getting bad, it's just that the software and the demands on it are increasing. So while it's fine for texts and fine for Zoom calls and fine for all this stuff, where it starts bogging down when I start asking it to do more intensive things like some video editing and LumaFusion, and just even skipping around to a whole lot of multitasking, this phone gets real warm because the processor just doesn't stop. It's showing its age. So I'm looking at the S24 Ultra. It is in my Amazon shopping cart right now. There's a deal on it. It's manageable, and I'm considering it. It also, these slab phones fit into gimbals better, and I do a lot of that type of work, and the cameras on the S24 Ultra are great. I read, don't quote me directly on this, but I was reading, I think it's from GSM Phone Arena, or it was a very respectable smartphone website. I Google searched, does the S24 Ultra record 10-bit video, meaning 10-bit video that I can later import into DaVinci Resolve or my video editors and have way more control over color grading and this and that. And it said yes, that the Galaxy S24 Ultra has 10-bit HEVC HDR10 plus recording. I knew it was HDR10. I knew it was HDR10 plus, and that's all fine and dandy. But was it 10-bit? Like, was it truly 10-bit? And I still need to do more further verification. I don't have an S24 to test. I want to import the video into DaVinci Resolve and see how much I can manipulate the video. Typically what happens with smartphone video is it looks exquisite on other smartphones. When you're looking at content on your smartphone, things shot with a smartphone camera look excellent on a smartphone camera. Where things fall apart typically, classically, is that you take that footage from your smartphone and then you put it in your audio or your video editor, and you're looking at it on a 1922, 25-inch, 27, 32-inch screen, and you see, oh yeah, that it doesn't hold up well when you blow up the image to a big TV or whatever. Kind of the small sensor, you're very aware how small the sensor actually is when you blow up the image to the size of a TV or a computer monitor. So I'm trying to see if that's the case or not with the S24. I don't have high expectations. It's not like I'm going to import video from the S24 Ultra into DaVinci Resolve and work on it in 4K or even 8K on my screen here. I know that there's going to be a bit of, you're going to be a bit disappointed if you start pixel peeping. But what I just want to know is the video usable to make content like for the museum or kind of the ultimate kind of run and gun setup? And I know the answer is yes. I know a lot of you watching this or listening to this right now have edited smartphone video on your computer on a big screen. And yes, there are pros and cons and trade-offs to shooting with the smartphone, but everything's usable because it all boils down to content. I mean, that's the most important thing anyways, is really this is where the conversation is going now, because I'm just stream of consciousness flowing here. I watched a video the other day on YouTube about the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, which is, I don't have it, but I've just heard wonderful things about it. It's so popular, it's hard to get. It's usually sold out, at least on Amazon. So it's a very popular, everybody and their grandmother, videographers and cinematographers who are using a run and gun setup, an EDC kind of pocket camera, swear by the Pocket 3, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. So I know I have pretty high confidence that it's a great camera. Now, one of the videos I saw was, it's one of those things like how to shoot cinematic content with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, which really, what that video is saying, and videos like that are saying, it's how to shoot cinematic content with anything is really what it means. How to shoot cinematic content with your Galaxy Note 9 from 2017. And here's where I'm getting at with all this, is that actually to make compelling content that people want to watch and that people stick around for, the camera you use, a lot of people, novices just getting into it, amateurs might think that the camera is the most important thing when it comes to making good video content, but the camera is actually one of the last things of importance and one of the least important things in making compelling content. In no particular order, there is a sequence to this, but the most important thing is the storytelling. What story are you trying to tell? Is it a good story? Because if it's a good story, then the camera doesn't matter. So after the story and what's the storytelling, then you come up with a shot list. Then the thing is cinematography, framing, lighting. Then you go down to audio is just as, if not most important. It might be number 2 on the list. You have to have a good story, good audio, good framing, good cinematography, good lighting, good editing. And then down the list, like one of the last things on the list is the camera, because you can tell a crappy story nobody wants to watch in 8K with the $6,000 Sony camera. If the content sucks, if it's something that people don't care about, if it's not a compelling story, if the audio is bad, I'm a big proponent of this. If the audio is bad and you're shooting in a juicy 4K video, even with the best lighting, if the audio is bad, no one's going to watch it. It's terrible. So there's so many other, all I'm getting at is there's so many other factors in what makes a video like a good video, what makes content a good content, that the camera you're using is way down on that list. It might be one of the last things. You can shoot compelling content that looks great, that sounds great, with a 360p potato, as long as the storytelling's good, as long as the shot list is great, the locations you are great, as long as the framing is great, as long as the cinematography is great, as long as the editing is great, as long as the audio is great, then down at the bottom of that list is that 360 potato camera. All that matters is the story, is the framing, is the cinematography, is all these other things that go into it. The camera is actually one of the least important parts of the entire ingredients of what makes a video good or not, of what makes content compelling or not. So bring that back around to, I know that if I get the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, that if I pixel peep on a giant 42-inch 4K monitor, is what I use, an LG TV, OLED TV as my main monitor here. I know that if I pixel peep on a 42-inch 4K OLED monitor, that, it's not going to hold up. Jack, shut up! He's downstairs and he hears me and he's just an idiot. Anyways, so I know that if I'm shooting content with the S24 Ultra and it doesn't look as good pixel peeping as my Lumix S5 here, it doesn't really matter, because it's going to look good enough. It's going to look good enough. And if I'm doing things right, lighting things right, doing proper framing and everything, that S24 is going to be an amazing tool for that. So that's why I'm considering it. Also, like I said, it fits into the DJI gimbals way better than a folding phone does. This thing doesn't. The the Z Fold 4, not great for gimbals. So what would I do with the Z Fold 4 if I get the S24 Ultra? Like, what would I? That's the rub. Is like, if I get the S24 Ultra, it's a little bit quicker in my upgrade cycle than I am usually comfortable with. I usually go 2 to 3 years minimum before upgrading my phone, and I'm at a 1.5 years maximum with the Z Fold 4, and I'm considering upgrading to the S24 Ultra. Not necessarily because the Z Fold is bad. It has an issue right now that hopefully gets fixed in a firmware update, but I could use the better cameras and the gimbal ability of the S24 Ultra and the horsepower. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. So I've spent most of the show talking about where I'm at with my kind of smartphone life. Considering going to the S24 Ultra. The other thing that I'm thinking about, and there's no time crunch on this, I think the phone is taking priority as far as upgrades are concerned over this next item. But my Lumix S5. You're watching this video right now with my go-to Sony ZV-1. I love the ZV-1. I did a review, kind of an impromptu review on the show of the ZV-1, that if you just one camera for everything, desert island camera, Sony ZV-1. It's so versatile, and the image is so good. This is a 1080p image, and I'm not particularly lit, amazingly. I've got my light panel over here, and I've got a little lamp over here, but the image is good. I'm picture profile 6. I will color grade it a little bit. 1080p. It's 1-inch sensor. Great camera, Sony ZV-1. But this Lumix X5, which is Lumix S5, Panasonic, my panty, Lumix S5, exquisite full frame camera, absolutely exquisite. There have been the Mark IIs. So you have the Sony Lumix S5 Mark II and the Mark II X. The Mark II X is what I have my eyes on, because it has more features that are applicable to videographers, which is what I do for my day job for the museum. IP streaming, open gate 6K. It's actually like 5.8K, but full open gate recording, meaning you're using the entire sensor, no pixel binning, no nothing like that. No quantization. It's just every pixel available on the sensor is open gate for you to use. That's what I mean. So open gate, full frame, all the other features that it has, a full-size HDMI output versus the micro HDMI that the first generation has. There's all sorts of other features that are very, very appealing to me as a videographer. The improved autofocus system, now it's based on, what is it? LiDAR or phase detect autofocus. So it's just as good as the Sonys and Canons out there now with the Lumix S5 Mark II and Mark II X. So the autofocus is important to me because I'm doing a lot more kind of shooting from the hip kind of stuff and vlogging stuff, where I'm going to hold the camera out in front of me and I need it to fix on my face, where the autofocus for the first generation Lumix S5 has always been a pinch point. It's always been one of the issues. If you go back and watch reviews for the Lumix S5, especially, after it came out, was, hey, great camera, great, but the autofocus is not as good, not nearly as good actually as the Sonys and Canons. I would say that it's borderline usable when you're shooting like 1080p 60 is probably the best bet for the autofocus system in the first generation Lumix S5, because it's based on frames. Part of the autofocus system on the first generation is just based on frame data. So the more frames per second you're sending into that system, the better the autofocus is, versus doing 4K, 24 frames a second. The autofocus sucks because you're feeding it a lot of pixels, and you're feeding it a lot of pixels at only 24 frames a second. So it's not a whole ton of available information for the autofocus to work if it's based on pixels, when it's based on the frames being given to the autofocus processor. But the new ones, Mark II, Mark II X, have the same kind of autofocus system as Canon and Sony, and it's way quicker, it locks on a lot faster, and that's something that I've come to realize that I need in my next kind of camera upgrade purchase. It's not anything critical right now. It's not a make or break to what I do at the moment. I can wait on it. But it is something that I'm looking at. I think I would keep my first gen S5 as a B cam. So if I'm doing interviews or things like that, I can have it off to the side as a B cam that will match, the footage will match the Mark II X that I do eventually get. Lumix also came out with a new 28-200 lens, which is about the same size as the 20-60 kit lens that comes with the S5. Now it's you can get 28-200 in about the same amount of size. The trade-offs for that is that it starts at a I think it's f4, and then it goes to, when you're at 200 millimeters, the lowest is f7.1. So you're losing some stops. It's kind of slow at the top end of 200 millimeters, but it's still like a 28-200 in a lens that's the same size as a kit lens. holy crap, that is appealing to a lot of people and appealing to me. It has built-in OIS, optical image stabilization, autofocus, all that good stuff. I've seen reviews of it. It's nice and sharp and crisp, and it looks great. And the trade-off of f4 to f7.1 is not that big of a deal, especially considering the size, considering the image stabilization, which the OIS makes up for a bit. It means you can shoot at as open as possible at a lower frame rate and still have buttery, stable footage with that the built-in optical image stabilization in the lens itself, and the body stabilization means you have a whole ton of stops of stabilization. That's one thing that Panasonic cameras have been known for, is their just excellent kind of class-leading stabilization. So there's some cool things happening with the L mount system right now. So that's the lens mount system that Panasonic uses is L mount. So I'm looking at the S5 IIX and eventually possibly that 28 to 200 lens. Again, that's nothing critical. That's nothing that's like on the table right now. I think my priority is what I am using all the time anyways, which is my phone. Going to that S24 Ultra, because I think that's going to be that's going to fit what I do much better. Somebody on our team, Mike, the team leader for our social media team at Houston Museum of Natural Science, he's got the S23. He got that, I don't know, a little less than a year ago. It looks awesome. The footage that comes off of it is amazing, and having the ultra wide and then the wide and then the telephoto and all that stuff. Now the S24, so the S23 Ultra does like 10x optical zoom, whereas the most optical zoom on the S24 is 3x. That's kind of a trade-off, although reviewers say that going up to 10x looks almost just as clean as the optical 10x of the S23. We'll see about all that. There's not going to be many scenarios where I am going to be 10x magnified using my smartphone camera. That's just not going to happen very often. That I'm going to go that telephoto with it. But yeah, smartphone upgrade a year and a half or so into my upgrade cycle, which is 6 months sooner than I usually do. I'm thinking about that, but I'm giving Samsung like one more day to do a major firmware upgrade on this Z Fold 4. And then I don't know, this is what pains my heart about it, and what pains my wallet a little bit about this is like, it sucks to know that I have such an awesome foldable phone that I wouldn't be using every day. And that bothers me that I'm leaving something that's perfectly viable, perfectly useful in the year 2024, that is excellent in the year 2024, kind of sitting here on my desk. I know that I'm going to tinker with it. I know that there'll be like weeks and months that I'm only using the S24 Ultra, and then there'll be weeks and months that I'm going back to the Z Fold 4. I like that idea about having two kind of flagship things. But yeah, it's upgrading sooner than I thought. But that's going to do it for this show. Thank you for hanging out with me. One thing I've learned in the past few shows is talking about Apple is you might as well be talking about religion or politics. It's so incredibly divisive. But anyways, you know what's not divisive, or shouldn't be, is that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love. You are worthy of receiving love. And you are worthy of your own self-respect. If you don't remember anything else from any podcast that I ever do, whatever you listen to, from this episode, from last episode, for any episode, I always end the show by telling you the truth that you are worthy of love. Worthy of giving love. That means you are worthy of saying I love you to somebody. You are, more importantly, deserving of someone telling you that they love you. You can accept that love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. One of the ways we get there is by leaning into our geek things and our hobbies, as long as they don't hurt other people. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. You are loved. I'll talk to you next time.